here. Okay. All righty, everybody. So it's been a long and twisted journey from when I first started driving truck to where I am currently, and here we're going to talk about earnings and money habits, and some of the advantages of going through adversity. So I mentioned before in previous videos when I first started driving truck, I only was making 23 cents per mile. This is in 2014, and that was about $23,000 per year, which is very, very low. I mean, I barely was making it. I might not even been making it break even, but I was willing to start low pay to get my foot in the door and get some experience and make a career change, get a skilled trade, get into trucking. And I remember those days when I didn't make a whole lot of money, and I carry oftentimes that mindset to present day when my earnings are much higher. It's not uncommon for an owner operator at Crete who owns their own truck to gross 5,000 for the week and have a net income of over 2,000 for the week. And you compare that to first started, and I was lucky to make a few $100 for the week. But when I didn't make any money, obviously I didn't spend any money, and there were some things I remember that carried with me all through the next 10 years. I remember when dash cameras first came out, and they weren't as sophisticated as they are now, and I really wanted a dash camera, and I was a rookie and I didn't have the money. It cost like $200 for a dash camera, but the company was holding a contest. I wasn't with Crete, I was with a smaller, it was called DeBoer Transportation out of Wisconsin, and they were holding a contest about inspecting a tractor and trailer, and the prize was a dash camera. I couldn't afford a dash camera, and I really wanted it. So I very thorough in my inspection, and I mean, anything I possibly could find that was wrong with the tractor and trailer. I even got inside the trailer, noticed how it wasn't swept out, and made that notation on the inspection sheet. And I looked in the owner's manual for when the oil changes were due and things like that, and checked the maintenance records on the truck. And I went through that as detailed as I possibly. I had so many notes on that inspection sheet, front and back, and I got the dash camera for free. you know, and it was a valuable lesson about money that it's like, you can't afford it, um, but you really appreciate the value of the dollar. When you don't have a lot of money, you really appreciate the value of the dollar. And I didn't have a CB either. I was a rookie. I didn't have a dash camera. I didn't have a CB, and it took me a month to save enough money to buy my first CB. And I still have that same CB today, and I use it every day in my truck, even as I'm an owner operator. It's a Unit Bearcat 980, single sideband CB. It works great, but it took me an entire month of saving my money in order to buy that CB. So you could see where, when you start out and you don't make a lot of money, you really appreciate when you do make money. Nowadays, as an owner operator, you can have a net income of $2,000 a week. You could have a net income of $10,000 a month. You can buy any dash camera, any CB you want. But I think it's the lessons you learn when you didn't have the money that helps make you successful when you do start making money. A lot of times when people start getting into trucking, they're not satisfied with the earnings, because you start out kind of on the low side, but you got to stick with it. When I started out, didn't make a lot of money. 10 years in, I make over $100,000 a year. You got to work. I mean, you definitely got to work, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you'll get out of it exactly what you put in it. If you If you put a lot into it, you'll get a lot out of it. You don't put a lot in it, you're not going to get a lot out of it. It's very simple. You're paid by the mile. So if you want to make decent money, you got to work hard. You got to run the miles. It's interesting to see, to look back and see how your finances have changed over the years. One of my priorities when I first started out was I wanted to pay off those credit cards. So I would say, within 2 years, I started paying down those credit cards. I think I had like over $10,000 in credit card debt. And then after I paid the credit cards off, then I was looking for the next thing. And the next thing was to pay off my student loan. I had a $30,000 student loan. Paid that off. And meanwhile, I purchased my own truck and I became an owner operator and I started making more money. So then I got my credit score over 800. And since I paid off my credit cards, then my credit improved. And then I was able to apply for new credit cards. And before I might have only had one or two credit cards. Now I have several. I don't have a balance on any of it, but I still have them. It helps me maintain and build credit. So it's a financial journey from when you first start, when you don't have anything, to 10 years later, and you have no debt, credit score over 800. I have an investment portfolio over $100,000, and I'm getting ready to purchase my third truck. This is the path that I traveled over the years. And I did other things, like I bought a pickup truck, paid cash for that. I bought an RV, and bought tools. Spent a lot of money on tools, and did a lot of work on my teeth for the dentist, thousands of dollars for that. And it's been I would say, like a healing process, because once you have a steady, reliable source of income, then you could do a lot of things. If you have even $500 a week every single week, you can make life more manageable. Now imagine if you were making $2,000 a week, life becomes very manageable. So this is the idea that you start out kind of on the low side, but you're constantly building. It's building of success upon success upon success. And in a 10-year period of time, you'll be amazed how far you've come. I see a lot of times people, they start out, they're in financial ruin, but given enough time, they pull themselves out. They'll have a steady source of income, and then they can make it work. So this is what attracts people to get their CDL. This is why drivers stay in trucking. It's not the most glamorous job, but it's very reliable, and it pays the bills and then some. I couldn't do the things that I was able to do without having my CDL. I mean, I tried, but it wasn't going to be overly successful in corporate America. But once you get a skilled trade, and you take your destiny in your own hands, you can find success. I consider my story, my journey, a success story. For me personally, it's exactly what I needed, exactly what I wanted, and I couldn't be happier with the results. So I continue to build on that going forward. The money saving habits I learned when I didn't have any money, now it's helping me when I do have money. So I don't necessarily spend money frivolously on things that I don't need. I take a large portion of my money and I invest it in my investment portfolio so that I can grow my money, so that someday I can retire. But I think when drivers get themselves in trouble is when they buy toys that they really don't need. They buy motorcycles, they buy boats, and they buy things that they probably rarely ever use, but they cost tens of thousands of dollars. But I don't do that. Even when I purchased my pickup truck, I bought it from the oil and gas industry as a used work truck. I already had close to 100,000 miles on it, but I knew I was only going to put like 5,000 miles a year on it, so that was perfectly fine. I just needed it to pull my RV, so uh, I was able to pay cash for the pickup truck, so I didn't have truck payments for pickup truck payments. So these are things that you do when you learn how to uh, value the value of a dollar. When you don't have money, you really appreciate it when you do have money. You don't forever forget those times when you struggle financially. And I still have that dash camera. Now I've upgraded it over the years to newer, better ones, and I have multiple dash cameras. But I still remember a time when I couldn't even afford a dash camera, and that sticks with me, through the years as I continue on with my journey. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.